The sun had long disappeared behind the city skyline, leaving the bus stop illuminated only by a flickering street lamp. Sophia Chen hugged her jacket tighter around her shoulders, checking her watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. It was already 10:30 p.m., well past her usual time to be home on a school night. The last bus had left without her 20 minutes ago, and her phone battery had died just as she was about to call her father. Just great, she muttered, wondering if she should start walking the 3 miles home or wait until her dad noticed she was missing and came looking for her. Her car had broken down earlier that day, which was why she had been forced to use public transportation in the first place. The sound of tires on wet pavement made her look up hopefully, but instead of her father's familiar sedan, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. Under normal circumstances, the sight might have been reassuring. Tonight, though, something about the way the officer stared at her through the window before slowly getting out made her stomach tighten with unease. Officer James Mercer had been on patrol for nearly 10 hours, and his patience had worn thin long ago. This was his 3rd consecutive night shift, and he'd already dealt with 2 domestic disputes, a shoplifting teenager, and a drunk driver. The sight of a young girl alone at a bus stop this late immediately triggered his suspicion. "What are you doing out here at this hour?" he asked, not bothering with a greeting. His flashlight beam hit her directly in the face, causing her to squint and raise a hand to shield her eyes. "My car broke down earlier today, and I missed the last bus," Sophia explained, trying to keep her voice steady, despite the officer's intimidating approach. "I was working on a group project at the library and we lost track of time." Officer Mercer's eyes narrowed. In his 15 years on the force, he'd heard every excuse in the book. "ID," he demanded, holding out his hand. Sophia reached into her backpack and pulled out her student ID and learner's permit. "I'm 16, she said. "I was just about to call my dad when my phone died." The officer examined her identification with obvious skepticism. "You know there's a curfew for minors in this county, right? No one under 18 out after 10 p.m. on weeknights." "I didn't know about the curfew," Sophia admitted. "But this is an emergency. My car's in the shop and not knowing the law isn't an excuse for breaking it." Officer Mercer cut her off. "What's in the backpack?" "Just school stuff," Sophia said, unzipping her bag to show him. "Books, my laptop, notes from our project." The officer shined his light into the backpack, poking through her belongings with a pen. Finding nothing suspicious, his frown deepened, as if disappointed he couldn't catch her in a more serious violation. "Where do you live?" he asked. "Pine Valley, about 3 miles east of here," Sophia replied, hoping he might offer her a ride home. Even though his attitude was making her uncomfortable, getting home safely seemed more important. Officer Mercer crossed his arms. "That's outside my patrol area. You shouldn't be hanging around here this late." "I wasn't hanging around," Sophia protested, feeling a flash of frustration. "I missed the bus and was trying to figure out how to get home." The officer's radio crackled, but he ignored it, instead watching Sophia with a look that made her feel as if she'd done something terribly wrong. "Turn out your pockets," he ordered suddenly. Sophia blinked in surprise. "What? Why?" "Just do it," he snapped. With trembling fingers, Sophia emptied her jacket pockets, producing only some loose change, a hair tie, and a folded receipt from the auto repair shop. "Is this really necessary?" she asked, her voice quivering slightly. "I haven't done anything wrong." Officer Mercer picked up the repair receipt and studied it. "This is dated today," he acknowledged, but his tone remained accusatory. "Still doesn't explain why you're out past curfew." "I already told you," Sophia said, struggling to keep her composure. "I was working on a school project and lost track of time. And then I missed the bus. I can show you our project on my laptop if you don't believe me." "Watch your tone, young lady," the officer warned, though Sophia had been nothing but respectful. This attitude is exactly the problem with kids today. A car drove by slowly, and Sophia raised her hand hoping to flag it down, but the driver accelerated past them. "I wasn't giving you attitude," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to explain my situation." Officer Mercer took a small notepad from his pocket and began writing. "I'm issuing you a citation for violating curfew. This will go on your record." Sophia's eyes widened. "A citation? But this isn't fair. I didn't mean to stay out late. It was an accident." "Life isn't fair," the officer replied coldly. "Maybe this will teach you to be more responsible with your time." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. She had never been in trouble before, She maintained a 4.0 GPA, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and was on track for a scholarship. Now she was being treated like a criminal for something completely beyond her control. "Can I at least use your phone to call my dad?" she asked. "He's probably worried about me." Officer Mercer hesitated, then reluctantly handed her his phone. Sophia's fingers shook as she dialed her father's number. When he didn't answer, she felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. "He's not picking up," she said, handing the phone back. "He might be out looking for me already." "That's not my problem," Officer Mercer said, tearing the citation from his notepad and thrusting it at her. "Sign here?" Sophia read the paper, her heart sinking at the $150 fine amount. "This says I was loitering with intent to disturb the peace. That's not what happened at all." "Sign it," the officer repeated firmly. "This isn't an admission of guilt. It just acknowledges you received the citation." With no choice, Sophia signed the paper, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Officer, please." She tried one last time. "Could you at least give me a ride to the edge of Pine Valley? It's not safe for me to walk home alone this late." Officer Mercer's face hardened. "I already told you that's outside my patrol area. You should have thought about getting home before staying out past curfew." As if to emphasize his point, he gestured to a nearby bench. "Sit there until your father comes. And don't wander off or I'll add more charges." Just then, Sophia spotted her dead phone in the officer's hand. He must have picked it up when examining her belongings. "Excuse me, that's my phone," she said. The officer glanced at the device. It's evidence." "Evidence of what?" Sophia asked, her voice rising slightly in panic. "You said yourself it's dead. I need it to contact my dad when it charges." "You were using it while loitering in a high-traffic area after hours," he said, tucking the phone into his pocket. "I need to check if there's evidence of any other illegal activity." "That's not true," Sophia protested, standing up. "You can't just take my property without cause." Officer Mercer stepped closer, towering over her. "Are you refusing to comply with a police officer? Because I can add that to your charges." Sophia felt her chest tighten with anxiety. She knew from her father's legal discussions at the dinner table that what the officer was doing wasn't right, but she also knew challenging him further might make things worse. "No, sir," she said quietly. Sitting back down. "That's what I thought," Officer Mercer said with a satisfied nod. "Your court date is listed on the citation. I suggest you show up with a better attitude than you've displayed tonight." He turned and walked back to his cruiser, Sophia's phone still in his pocket. Through the windshield, she could see him scrolling through it, even though he had claimed it was dead. When he finally drove away, Sophia buried her face in her hands and let the tears flow freely. The citation crumpled in her grip as her shoulders shook with silent sobs. She had always been taught that police officers were there to protect and serve, but tonight she felt victimized by the very person who should have helped her. After several minutes, she wiped her eyes and looked around at the deserted street. With no other options, she gathered her belongings and began the long walk home in the dark, jumping at every shadow and sound. The 3 miles seemed endless as she replayed the encounter in her mind. Why had the officer been so cruel? What had she done to deserve such treatment? And how would she explain this citation to her father? What Sophia didn't know, as she finally turned onto her street an hour later with blistered feet and tear-stained cheeks, was that Officer Mercer had made a grave mistake. The man whose daughter he had just humiliated was not just any concerned parent. Michael. Chen was a highly respected judge who had recently been appointed to head the city's new police oversight committee, a fact that Officer Mercer would soon discover. Much to his dismay, as Sophia approached her house, she saw her father's car in the driveway and the lights still on. Taking a deep breath, she prepared to tell him everything that had happened. Little did she know that this painful incident would set in motion a chain of events that would change both her life and Officer Mercer's forever. Michael. Chen had been pacing the living room floor for the past 2 hours, repeatedly calling Sophia's phone only to be sent straight to voicemail. He had already driven her usual route home twice, checked with her friends, and even called the local hospitals. With each passing minute, his worry deepened into something close to panic. When he finally heard footsteps on the front porch, he rushed to open the door before Sophia could even reach for her keys. The sight of his daughter, exhausted, disheveled, and clearly upset, made his heart sink. "Sophia, where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." He pulled her into a tight hug, relief washing over him. Then, stepping back to look at her face, he noticed her red-rimmed eyes and tear-stained cheeks. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Sophia stepped inside and dropped her backpack on the floor with a heavy thud. She looked physically and emotionally drained. "My phone died and I couldn't call you. Then I missed the last bus and—" Her voice cracked as fresh tears welled up. Michael led her to the couch and sat beside her, his judicial composure giving way to fatherly concern. "Take your time. Just tell me what happened." Taking a deep breath, Sophia recounted the entire ordeal. Her car breaking down, working late at the library, missing the bus, and then the encounter with Officer Mercer. As she described the officer's hostile attitude and unfair treatment, Michael's expression changed from concern to disbelief, and finally to barely controlled anger. "He took your phone?" Michael asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "And issued you a citation for loitering?" Sophia nodded, pulling the crumpled paper from her pocket and handing it to her father. "He wouldn't even give me a ride home. I had to walk all the way from downtown." Michael examined the citation, his trained legal mind immediately spotting several issues with the charge. "This citation isn't even filled out properly," he muttered, then looked up at his daughter. "And you said he searched your bag without permission?" "Yes. And he was scrolling through my phone in his car even though he told me it was dead and needed to be checked for evidence." Sophia wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. "Dad, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to get home." Michael put his arm around her shoulders. "I know you didn't, sweetheart. What that officer did was completely inappropriate and possibly illegal. Taking your phone, searching your belongings without cause, falsifying a citation." He stopped himself, not wanting to overwhelm Sophia with legal terminology when she was already upset. "Do you remember his name or badge number?" he asked. "Mercer. Officer James Mercer," Sophia replied. "Badge number 4872. I made sure to remember it because I knew what he was doing wasn't right." A small, proud smile crossed Michael's face despite his anger. His daughter had kept her wits about her even in such a difficult situation. That was smart thinking. He reached for a notepad on the coffee table and began writing down all the details while they were still fresh in Sophia's mind. The exact time and location, what was said, the officer's actions, and any witnesses who might have been present. "I'm going to help you through this," Michael assured her. "But first you need to rest. It's been a long night and you have school tomorrow. We can talk more about how to handle this in the morning." Sophia hesitated. "Dad, are you going to use your position to get him in trouble? I don't want special treatment just because you're a judge." Michael's expression softened. His daughter's concern for fairness, even after being treated so unfairly herself, reminded him why he had dedicated his life to the justice system. "No special treatment," he promised. "We'll follow the proper channels for filing a complaint just like any other citizen would. The fact that I happen to be on the police oversight committee means I'll have to be extra careful to follow protocol, not less." Sophia nodded, looking relieved. "Okay, good." After Sophia had gone to bed, Michael sat alone in his study, the citation spread out before him. As both a father and a judge, he felt a complex mix of emotions: protective rage that someone had treated his daughter this way, and professional concern about an officer who clearly wasn't upholding his oath to protect and serve. He opened his laptop and began researching the proper procedures for filing a formal complaint against a police officer. As head of the newly formed Police Oversight Committee, Michael was intimately familiar with these processes, but he wanted to make absolutely certain he didn't overstep his bounds or use his position inappropriately. The next morning, while Sophia was getting ready for school, Michael made 2 important phone calls. The first was to the auto repair shop to arrange for a rental car, so Sophia wouldn't have to rely on public transportation again. The second was to the police department's internal affairs division to request the body camera footage from Officer Mercer's encounter with his daughter. "I understand there's a formal process for civilian complaints," Michael said to the internal affairs officer, deliberately not mentioning his position as a judge. "I'd like to begin that process and request the footage as evidence." After hanging up, he noticed Sophia standing in the doorway looking hesitant. "Do I really have to go to school today?" she asked. "I don't think I can focus after what happened." Michael considered this. Under normal circumstances, he would have encouraged her to push through. but he recognized that the previous night's incident had been genuinely traumatic. "No, you can stay home today," he said. "But I do have to go to work." "There's a committee meeting I can't miss." Sophia nodded, relief evident on her face. "Thanks, Dad. One more thing," Michael added. "I need to take a photo of that citation before I leave." He carefully photographed the document, noting the incorrect codes cited, the inconsistencies in the officer's account, and the unprofessional nature of some of the handwritten notes in the margins. At the courthouse that day, Michael found it difficult to concentrate on his regular cases. During a break, he discreetly contacted a clerk in the records department. "I need to look into an officer's conduct record," he said. "It's for the Oversight Committee. Officer James Mercer, badge 4872. The clerk promised to compile the information by the end of the day. "Is this for next week's committee meeting, Judge Chen?" "Possibly," Michael replied, keeping his tone neutral. "It depends on what's in the record." By late afternoon, a sealed envelope was delivered to his chambers. Inside was Officer Mercer's service record, including civilian complaints, disciplinary actions, and performance reviews. As Michael read through the documents, a troubling pattern emerged. Over his 15-year career, Officer Mercer had accumulated 17 complaints for excessive force, unprofessional conduct, and discriminatory behavior, particularly toward young people and minorities. Most of the complaints had been dismissed due to lack of evidence or witness corroboration, but the sheer number was concerning. Even more alarming were his supervisor's notes from recent performance reviews. "Officer Mercer shows increasing signs of burnout and hostility toward the public," one stated. "Recommend mandatory stress management training and possible psychological evaluation." The recommendation had apparently been ignored. Just as Michael was finishing his review of the documents, his phone rang. It was the Internal Affairs officer. "Judge Chen, we've retrieved the body camera footage you requested. However, there seems to be a discrepancy. The footage from the time period you specified appears to be missing." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "Missing? You mean deleted?" "We're not sure yet," the officer replied carefully. "It could be a technical glitch. We're looking into it." "I see," Michael said, keeping his voice even. "And I assume Officer Mercer has been notified of the complaint?" "Yes, standard procedure. He's been assigned desk duty pending investigation." After hanging up, Michael sat back in his chair processing this new information. The missing footage, the pattern of complaints, the citation itself, all pointed to an officer who was not only failing in his duty, but actively causing harm to the community he was sworn to protect. As chair of the Police Oversight Committee, Michael had the authority to launch a full investigation. As Sophia's father, he wanted justice for how she had been treated. The challenge would be balancing these roles without compromising either. That evening, when he returned home, he found Sophia looking better than she had that morning. The day of rest had helped restore some of her natural resilience. "Any news about Officer Mercer?" she asked as they sat down for dinner. Michael nodded, choosing his words carefully. "The Internal Affairs Division is investigating. I've requested the body camera footage, but there seems to be an issue with it. And I've reviewed his service record. And," Sophia prompted, "and it appears this wasn't an isolated incident. Officer Mercer has a history of similar complaints." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "So what happens now?" Michael served himself some salad before answering. "Now we wait for the investigation to proceed. And next week, the Police Oversight Committee will review the case." "Will you have to recuse yourself since I'm involved?" Sophia asked, showing her usual perceptiveness. "Not necessarily," Michael explained, "but I will need to disclose our connection to the committee. Transparency is essential." What neither of them knew was that across town, Officer Mercer was just learning exactly whose daughter he had mistreated, and the potential consequences of his actions were beginning to dawn on him with frightening clarity. Officer James Mercer slammed his locker shut, the metallic clang echoing through the nearly empty police station locker room. Being assigned to desk duty felt like a slap in the face after 15 years on patrol. His fellow officers had been giving him a wide berth all day, their sideways glances telling him they knew something he didn't. "Hey, Mercer," called Officer Wilson, one of the few colleagues who still spoke to him freely. "You hear about the complaint filed against you?" Mercer shrugged. "Some teenager who didn't like getting cited for breaking curfew. It'll blow over like all the others." Wilson leaned against the lockers, arms crossed. Not this time, man. Word is the kid's father is Judge Chen, Michael Chen. The name hit Mercer like a physical blow. Everyone in the department knew Judge Chen, recently appointed to head the new police oversight committee, with a reputation for being tough but fair. He felt the color drain from his face. The Michael Chen? Are you sure? Wilson nodded grimly. The same. And rumor has it they're looking for your body cam footage from that night. Mercer swallowed hard. He hadn't actually turned his body camera off. That would have been too obvious, but he had accidentally covered it with his jacket during most of the encounter with the girl. Still, there would be audio, and that was damning enough. Look, Wilson continued, lowering his voice. Whatever you did, you might want to get ahead of this. Chen's not someone who lets things slide, especially when it comes to his family. After Wilson left, Mercer sat heavily on the bench, his mind racing. The teenager at the bus stop, Sophia, had given her last name, but he hadn't paid attention. If he had known she was Judge Chen's daughter, he would have. What treated her better? The thought made him uncomfortably aware of his own bias. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. Everything okay? You're late. Nothing was okay, but he couldn't explain that in a text. With a heavy sigh, he grabbed his jacket and headed home, the weight of his actions pressing down on him with each step. The next morning, Michael Chen arrived at the police station promptly at 9 a.m. He had decided to view the body camera footage in person, not trusting the technical glitch explanation. As a judge, he had enough clout to make this happen, even if he was careful not to abuse his position. The desk sergeant recognized him immediately. Judge Chen, we've been expecting you. Captain Reynolds would like to speak with you before you review the footage. Michael was led to the captain's office, where a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor greeted him. Judge Chen, thank you for coming in. I understand you've requested Officer Mercer's body camera footage from 2 nights ago. Michael nodded. That's correct. I was told there was an issue with it. Captain Reynolds gestured for him to take a seat. Yes, initially we thought the footage was missing. However, our tech team has recovered it. Before you view it, I want you to know that I've seen it myself and I don't condone Officer Mercer's behavior. I appreciate that, Michael said carefully, but I'd like to form my own opinion. Of course, the captain handed him a folder. Here's the preliminary report from Internal Affairs. They've already interviewed Officer Mercer. He admits to improper conduct but claims he was having a bad night after a difficult shift. Michael accepted the folder but didn't open it. A bad night isn't an excuse for mistreating a minor who needed help. I couldn't agree more, Captain Reynolds said. That's why I've recommended disciplinary action regardless of the outcome of your committee's review. Michael appreciated the captain's straightforward approach but remained cautious. Too often he had seen police departments close ranks to protect their own. Thank you for your transparency, Captain. Now about that footage? 20 minutes later, Michael sat in a small viewing room, watching the body camera footage with growing dismay. Though the visual was indeed obscured for portions of the encounter, the audio was clear enough. Officer Mercer's tone was even more condescending and hostile than Sophia had described. The officer could be heard mocking her when he returned to his cruiser, calling her a spoiled rich kid to another officer over the radio. What bothered Michael most wasn't just the treatment of his daughter, but the casual nature of it, as if this was Mercer's standard way of interacting with the public. After viewing the footage twice, Michael met again with Captain Reynolds. I'll need a copy of this for the Oversight Committee, he said, and I'd like to know what disciplinary actions you're considering. The captain nodded. We're looking at a 2-week suspension without pay, mandatory retraining, and a formal reprimand in his file. Michael kept his expression neutral, though he felt the punishment was insufficient given Mercer's history. I see. And has Officer Mercer's service record been taken into account? The 17 prior complaints? Captain Reynolds looked surprised. You've seen his complete record. I requested it as part of my committee duties, Michael explained. The pattern of behavior is concerning, to say the least. The captain sighed. Between us, Judge Chen, Mercer used to be a good cop, dedicated by the book. But these last few years, she shook her head. Burnout is real in this job, and some officers don't handle it well. Burnout explains stress, Michael countered. It doesn't excuse abuse of power. As he left the station with a copy of the footage, Michael couldn't help but reflect on the complexity of the situation. As a judge, he had sentenced countless individuals for their mistakes, always trying to balance justice with mercy. Now, with his daughter directly affected, he found that balance harder to maintain. Across town, Sophia returned to school for the first time since the incident. She had insisted on going, not wanting to fall behind in her classes. But as she walked through the hallways, she felt strangely disconnected from her surroundings, the normalcy of school life at odds with her recent experience. During lunch, her friend Lily sat beside her. "Hey, you okay? You've been super quiet all morning." Sophia hesitated, then decided to confide in her friend. As she recounted what had happened with Officer Mercer, Lily's eyes widened. "That's messed up," Lily said when Sophia finished. "But at least your dad can do something about it, right? Being a judge and all?" "He's trying," Sophia admitted. "But he has to be careful not to show favoritism just because I'm his daughter." "Still, that officer deserves to be fired," Lily said firmly. Sophia wasn't so sure. The whole experience had left her with complicated feelings about justice and punishment. "I don't know if getting him fired would solve anything," she said slowly. "Maybe he needs help, not just punishment." Lily looked at her incredulously. "Seriously? After how he treated you?" "I'm not saying he shouldn't face consequences," Sophia clarified. "Just that firing him doesn't fix the bigger problem. My dad says there are officers like him in every department." The conversation stayed with Sophia throughout the day. By the time she arrived home that afternoon, she had made a decision. She found her father in his study, reviewing documents for the upcoming Oversight Committee meeting. "Dad, I've been thinking," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "About Officer Mercer and the committee review." Michael looked up, giving her his full attention. "What's on your mind?" "I want to speak at the review," she said firmly. "To tell my side of the story in person." Her father's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You don't have to do that, Sophia. The footage in my testimony should be enough. But it's not just about me anymore," she insisted. "After what you told me about his history, I keep thinking about all the other people he's treated badly who didn't have a judge for a father. Someone needs to speak for them too." Michael studied his daughter with a mix of pride and concern. "It won't be easy. Committee hearings can be intimidating, and Officer Mercer will be there." "I know," Sophia said, her voice gaining confidence. "But I need to do this, not just for myself." After a long moment, Michael nodded. "All right, I'll arrange it. But I want you to be prepared for how difficult it might be." "I will be," Sophia promised, and that same evening, Officer Mercer sat at his kitchen table, staring at the suspension notice he'd received that afternoon. 2 weeks without pay would hurt his family financially, but it was the formal reprimand that bothered him more. After 15 years of service, his record would be permanently marked. His wife, Elena, sat across from him, concern etched on her face. "James, talk to me. What really happened with that girl?" Mercer ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I messed up, okay? I was tired, frustrated. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Elena's expression hardened. "That's not good enough, James. You don't get to ruin someone's night just because you're having a bad day. Especially not a kid." Her words stung because they echoed what the captain had told him earlier. "I know," he admitted. "But now it's blown up into this whole thing with the Oversight Committee. Judge Chen is going to make an example of me. Can you blame him?" Elena asked softly. "If it was our daughter, wouldn't you want justice too?" The question hit home in a way nothing else had. Mercer had a 16-year-old daughter of his own. The thought of someone treating her the way he had treated Sophia Chen made his stomach turn. "The hearing is next week," he said quietly. "The captain thinks I should offer a formal apology." "Is that all you're going to do?" Elena pressed. "Apologize because you have to?" Mercer looked at his wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. When had he become the kind of person who needed to be told to do the right thing? "No," he said finally. "I'm going to take responsibility. Real responsibility." The question was whether Judge Chen, and more importantly his daughter, would be willing to listen. The day of the Police Oversight Committee hearing arrived with a tense atmosphere hanging over the Chen household. Sophia stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her modest blue blouse. She had deliberately chosen to dress simply but respectfully, nothing that could make her appear either privileged or trying to gain sympathy. "You ready?" Michael asked, appearing in her doorway. Sophia took a deep breath. "I think so. I've been practicing what I want to say. Michael smiled gently. Just speak from the heart. Tell the truth as you experienced it. That's all anyone can ask. As they drove to City Hall where the hearing would take place, Sophia stared out the window, her thoughts racing.
Dad, will Officer Mercer lose his job because of me?
Michael glanced at her, then back at the road. Whatever happens to Officer Mercer will be because of his own actions, not because of you. Remember that. But what do you think should happen to him? She pressed. Michael considered this carefully before answering. I believe in proportionate consequences and the potential for reform. Officer Mercer's behavior was unacceptable, especially given his pattern of similar incidents. But the goal shouldn't just be punishment, it should be improvement of the system. When they arrived, Michael had to separate from Sophia due to his role on the committee. I'll see you inside, he told her. The committee assistant will show you where to wait until you're called to speak. Inside the hearing room, 5 committee members, including Michael, sat at a long table at the front. About 30 chairs were arranged for observers, mostly filled with police department representatives, community advocates, and a few journalists. Officer Mercer sat in the front row, wearing his full uniform, looking straight ahead with a tense expression. Michael opened the proceedings with a statement. Before we begin, I must disclose that I have a personal connection to this case. The civilian complainant is my daughter. I've consulted with the ethics board, who determined I need not recuse myself as long as I don't cast the deciding vote in any recommendations. Are there any objections to my continued participation? No one spoke up, though Michael noticed several speculative glances between the police representatives. Very well, he continued. This hearing concerns a complaint filed against Officer James Mercer regarding an incident on the night of September 15th. We'll hear testimony from all parties, review the evidence, and make recommendations accordingly. The committee first called the internal affairs investigator, who presented a dry but thorough account of the facts, including the body camera footage. Though the video portion was partially obscured, the audio clearly captured Officer Mercer's dismissive tone and inappropriate comments. When it was Officer Mercer's turn to speak, he approached the podium with visible discomfort. He cleared his throat and looked down at his prepared statement, then unexpectedly set the paper aside. I had a whole statement written out, he began, his voice rougher than usual, about my years of service and the stresses of the job. But listening to that recording of myself, I realized none of that matters. The fact is, I failed that night. A murmur rippled through the room at this departure from the expected defense. I failed in my duty to serve and protect, Mercer continued. Miss Chen needed help, and instead I treated her like a criminal. I've been making excuses for my behavior for too long, blaming stress or burnout. But the truth is simpler and harder to face. I stopped seeing the people I encounter on the job as people. The room fell silent, everyone's attention fixed on the officer's unexpected candor. I'm not asking for leniency, he said. I'm here to take responsibility and accept whatever consequences the committee deems appropriate. I just want Miss Chen to know I'm genuinely sorry for how I treated her. As Mercer returned to his seat, Michael made a note to himself, impressed despite his lingering anger at how his daughter had been treated. It took courage to abandon a prepared defense and speak honestly. Next, it was Sophia's turn. She walked to the podium looking smaller than her 16 years in the formal setting, but her voice was steady as she began. My name is Sophia Chen. A week ago, I was stranded at a bus stop after my phone died. When Officer Mercer arrived, I thought he would help me get home safely. Instead, he made me feel scared, humiliated, and helpless. She recounted the events clearly and without embellishment, describing how Officer Mercer had questioned her motives, searched her belongings, confiscated her phone, and issued an unjustified citation. What bothers me most isn't just how I was treated, she continued, gaining confidence. It's knowing that this happens to people who don't have the resources or connections I have. People who can't fight back when they're treated unfairly. She paused, then looked directly at Officer Mercer for the first time. I heard your apology and I appreciate it. But an apology only matters if it leads to change. I don't want you to lose your job. I want you to do your job better, to be the kind of officer who helps people when they're vulnerable, not one who makes them feel worse. As Sophia concluded her statement, Michael felt a surge of pride. His daughter had spoken with a wisdom beyond her years, focusing not on retribution but on the possibility of positive change. The committee members asked Sophia several follow-up questions, which she answered thoughtfully. When she was excused, Michael watched her take a seat at the back of the room, choosing to stay and witness the rest of the proceedings. After hearing from Captain Reynolds about the department's internal disciplinary measures and from a police psychologist about officer burnout, the committee deliberated openly. As promised, Michael participated in the discussion but abstained from the final vote. Based on the evidence presented, including Officer Mercer's service record and his testimony today, we recommend the following, announced Committee Member Thompson, reading from their joint decision. A 30-day suspension without pay, mandatory completion of a comprehensive retraining program focusing on de-escalation and community relations, and 6 months of weekly sessions with the department psychologist. Thompson continued, additionally, we recommend Officer Mercer be reassigned to community outreach upon his return to duty, with quarterly reviews of his progress for a period of 1 year. The recommendation was stronger than the department's internal discipline but stopped short of termination. It focused on rehabilitation rather than purely punishment, which aligned with the committee's broader goals of improving police-community relations. As the hearing concluded, people began filing out of the room. Michael stayed behind to complete some paperwork, watching as Officer Mercer approached Sophia in the back row. He tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but stayed where he was, allowing his daughter to handle the interaction herself. Miss Chen, Mercer said, keeping a respectful distance. I wanted to thank you for what you said, about wanting me to be better at my job rather than losing it. Sophia regarded him cautiously. Did you mean what you said? About taking responsibility? Mercer nodded. Every word. This situation has been eye-opening. I've been coasting on autopilot for years, getting more bitter with each shift. It took something like this to make me see what I've become. So what happens now? Sophia asked. Now I face the consequences and do the work to earn back my badge, Mercer replied, and hopefully become the kind of officer people are glad to see when they're in trouble. He hesitated, then added, Your phone was returned to the property desk. I made sure it was properly logged. I'm sorry for taking it. Sophia accepted this with a small nod. Thank you for telling me that. As Mercer turned to leave, Sophia spoke again. Officer Mercer, everyone deserves a second chance. Just don't waste it. From across the room, Michael watched this exchange with mixed emotions. The judge in him was satisfied that justice had been served in a measured, constructive way. The father in him was still protective, but immensely proud of his daughter's maturity and compassion. Later, as they walked to their car, Michael put an arm around Sophia's shoulders. You did well in there. How are you feeling? Sophia considered the question. Relieved, I think. And hopeful, maybe. Do you think he'll actually change? That's up to him, Michael said. But sometimes being held accountable is exactly what people need to find their way back. As they drove home, Michael reflected on how this incident, painful as it had been, had revealed his daughter's strength and reinforced his own belief in restorative justice. Officer Mercer had been forced to confront his behavior, but had also been given a path toward redemption, a balance that Michael had always strived for in his courtroom. What neither of them could know yet was how this confrontation would shape all their futures in unexpected ways. 6 months had passed since the Oversight Committee hearing. The crisp autumn air had given way to winter and then to spring, bringing new growth and change to the city and to the lives of those affected by that night at the bus stop. Officer James Mercer stood outside the community center, checking his watch. He was early for the youth mentorship program as usual. These days he made a point of arriving before the teenagers, preparing the space in his thoughts for their weekly discussions. The program had been part of his rehabilitation plan, but what had begun as an obligation had gradually become the most meaningful part of his week. Working with teens from across the city, especially those from underprivileged neighborhoods, had opened his eyes to challenges he had previously dismissed or misunderstood. Officer Mercer. He turned to see Damon, one of the program's most consistent attendees, approaching with his younger brother in tow. Hey Damon, who's this? My brother Kai. He wanted to check out what we do here. Mercer smiled and extended his hand to the younger boy. Nice to meet you, Kai. We're glad to have you. As more teens filtered in, Mercer reflected on how much had changed. The mandatory retraining and therapy sessions had been difficult at first, forcing him to confront years of accumulated cynicism and bias. But as the weeks passed, he'd begun to recognize how those attitudes had affected not only his work, but his entire life. His reassignment to community outreach had initially felt like a demotion. Beat cops had teased him about becoming a social worker with a badge, but over time, he'd discovered an aptitude for connecting with young people, perhaps because he was finally listening instead of judging. Inside the center, the teens gathered in their usual circle. Today's topic was encounters with authority, a subject Mercer had once avoided but now embraced as an opportunity for honest conversation. "Before we start," he said, "I want to share something with you all. Some of you know that I'm here because of a mistake I made. I treated someone unfairly because of my own frustrations and biases. I've learned that having authority means nothing if you don't use it responsibly." The teens nodded, most of them familiar with his story by now. What they didn't know was that today's session would have a special guest. "We have someone joining us who can offer a different perspective," Mercer continued, glancing toward the door as it opened. Sophia Chen entered the room, looking more confident than she had at the hearing 6 months ago. She had recently turned 17 and carried herself with a new sense of purpose. "This is Sophia," Mercer introduced her. "She's going to share her experience of being on the receiving end of an officer's misuse of power, specifically mine." A murmur of interest rippled through the group. They hadn't expected this level of transparency. "Thank you for having me," Sophia began. 6 months ago, I was stranded at a bus stop at night. Officer Mercer approached me, and instead of helping me get home safely, he treated me like a criminal." She recounted the experience clearly but without anger, describing how the incident had affected her trust in authority figures and her sense of security. "But that's not the end of the story," she continued. "What happened next showed me the power of accountability and the possibility of real change." Over the next hour, Sophia and Officer Mercer led a powerful discussion with the teens about police-community relations, personal responsibility, and how to stand up for yourself while maintaining respect for others. When the session ended, many of the teens lingered to ask Sophia questions or share their own experiences. Mercer stepped back, giving them space, proud of how far they had all come. Later that evening, Michael Chen was working late in his chambers when his assistant knocked on the door. "Judge Chen, Officer Mercer is here to see you. He says you're expecting him." Michael nodded. "Send him in." Officer Mercer entered, no longer in uniform but dressed in civilian clothes, a small but significant detail that Michael noted with approval. "Thank you for making time for me, Judge Chen," Mercer said, taking the offered seat across from Michael's desk. "Sophia told me the session went well today," Michael said. The formality that had characterized their previous interactions had softened somewhat, though a certain professional distance remained. It did. The kids were engaged, asked tough questions. Your daughter was remarkable, honest but not bitter. They really listened to her. Michael smiled slightly. "She has that effect on people." Mercer nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. "I wanted to deliver this to you personally. It's my 6-month progress report for the Oversight Committee." Michael accepted it, though he had already reviewed an advance copy. The report detailed Mercer's completion of all required retraining, consistent attendance at therapy sessions, and exemplary performance in his new community outreach role. His supervisors noted a complete transformation in attitude and approach. "Captain Reynolds speaks highly of your progress," Michael said, setting the report aside. "The program is working," Mercer acknowledged. "Not just for me. The department's implementing some of the committee's broader recommendations. De-escalation training for all officers, community feedback sessions, revised procedures for interactions with minors." Michael leaned back in his chair. "That's good to hear. Systemic change takes time, but it starts with individual commitment." There was a moment of silence before Mercer spoke again, his voice quieter. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you. I've been thinking about my long-term role in the department." "Oh?" Michael raised an eyebrow. "I'm applying for a permanent position in the youth division, working with teens, focusing on prevention rather than punishment. My experience makes me uniquely qualified to help bridge the gap between young people and law enforcement." Michael studied the man before him. 6 months ago, he had seen Officer Mercer as the embodiment of everything wrong with policing: arrogant, biased, abusing his authority. Now he saw someone who had embraced accountability and found a new purpose through it. "I think you would excel in that role," Michael said sincerely. "The Oversight Committee's next quarterly review is in 2 weeks. I'll make sure your application is noted in our assessment." "Thank you, sir." Mercer stood to leave, then hesitated. "Your daughter mentioned she's starting a student advocacy group at her school? Something about supporting teens who've had negative experiences with authority figures?" Michael nodded. "She's passionate about it, turning her experience into something positive. She mentioned they might need a law enforcement perspective, someone to help them understand the system they're trying to navigate. If she's interested, I'd be willing to consult." Michael considered this unexpected offer. "I'll let her know. It would be her decision, of course." "Of course," Mercer agreed. "Good evening, Judge Chen." After Mercer left, Michael sat thinking about the strange path that had led them all here. What had begun as a traumatic incident for his daughter had catalyzed important changes, not just for Officer Mercer, but for the police department and perhaps the wider community. 2 weeks later, Sophia was setting up chairs for the first official meeting of her student advocacy group. Know Your Rights. What had started as a personal project had quickly gained interest from fellow students, particularly those from communities with historically tense relationships with law enforcement. Her father entered the classroom where they were gathering, carrying a box of printed materials. "Just dropping these off," Michael said. "Pamphlets about legal rights, civil liberties, and proper police procedures. Official information, but in language teens can understand." "Thanks, Dad. These are perfect." Sophia took the box, noticing a business card on top. "What's this?" "Officer Mercer's contact information. He's officially been reassigned to the youth division, and he's offered to be a resource for your group. No pressure, just an option if you think it would be valuable." Sophia picked up the card, turning it over thoughtfully. Having someone from the inside who can explain the system, that could actually be really helpful. Her father nodded. Sometimes the most effective advocates for change are those who've seen the problems from both sides. As students began filing in for the meeting, Sophia tucked the card into her folder. 6 months ago, she couldn't have imagined wanting anything to do with Officer Mercer. Now she saw the possibility of turning their shared experience into something constructive. "Ready?" her father asked, preparing to leave her to run the meeting. Sophia looked around at the gathering students, feeling a sense of purpose. More than ready. As Michael left, he felt a profound pride in his daughter's resilience and vision. The incident that could have left her fearful or bitter had instead inspired her to become an agent of positive change, and in an unexpected way, it had done the same for Officer Mercer. Justice, Michael reflected, came in many forms. Sometimes the most meaningful kind wasn't found in punishments or rulings, but in the transformations that followed when people were given both accountability and opportunity. What had begun as a shameful act had led to something neither he nor Sophia nor Officer Mercer could have predicted: a chance to create lasting change, one conversation at a time.